Hello, Forecaster here again, and we are back for episode 166. And for this episode, I have some very good news. As you can see, I'm standing on the path going off from my base to the area behind it. And normally, when I turn around and face my base and all of the tile entities, machines, and cables galore that are inside, my frame rate would take a nosedive into the barely playable area of under 10 FPS. Now, I'm currently looking at about 60. You should be seeing 30 because that is what I'm recording at. But if I turn around in a dramatic fashion, there's no effect. Still looking at 30, 60 FPS, you will be seeing 30. If I start approaching my base, take a little dip, goes down to 40, because we are getting closer to tile entities. We're now doing between 30 and 40. But by now, the frame rate would have gone down to the 5 FPS area. And once inside, it would be absolutely terrible. The game would be barely playable. But now we are still looking at around a 40 FPS, which is nice. You should still be seeing 30. You will pretty much only notice any difference if we drop below 30, which pretty much doesn't happen anymore. So what has happened is I have finally been able to upgrade my motherboard and CPU. I now have an i7 4 GHz CPU and an accompanying motherboard, of course, because the old one was not compatible with that at all. I also have more RAM. Now have 16 gigabytes instead of 6 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM instead of DDR2. And I can now play Minecraft even in this base without any issues. However, because I've been working on it for so long, I'm still going to build my new base. Because there are, besides the performance benefits, this base is a mess. It is ugly, messy, there's stuff everywhere. Things have grown together almost. Like when I put this computer here, there was a lot of space here. Now you can barely squeeze through here anymore. We have pipes going everywhere, cables running through the floor. We have lights that aren't working because they don't get power, and I don't know if it's a bug in the mod or if it's because power don't reach here, although it should, but I don't know. So yeah, it's a gigantic mess. You can see I put a glowstone block here because there was a spawn spot right here because this light wasn't on. And yeah, so I'm going to continue working on the railway, and I've actually been making decent progress on that. Although I did have a setback when I realized that I was using the wrong pillar distance for the robot. So I had to spend some time to write a program to remove the foundations again, and which I've done. Now I was going to, or I did actually record that, but unfortunately I was having some troubles with my microphone at the time. It wasn't, or troubles with Bandicam actually, because when I changed the motherboard and CPU, my Windows had to reinstall a bunch of drivers for the hardware, and that apparently caused Bandicam to uh, not see the microphone at first. And when that happens, it disables the secondary audio input, which is my microphone, of course. So I would have to go in and reselect it, and I didn't notice that until after I was done recording and noticed that there wasn't a secondary or second audio track in the file. So unfortunately I had to scrap that footage because I didn't want to do a separate voiceover in post, because that would feel less genuine somehow. I don't like doing that unless I absolutely have to. So I'm going to pop back to the current bridge project, which is going to involve some walking, so I'm going to cut it out because the train is at that location, so I'm going to have to walk there. So I will see you in a little bit once I am there. Alright, so here we are at the bridge location. As you can see, we have a row of foundations that are further apart than they were before. We had a foundation here before, and then the next one was one block after the current foundation here. But those have been removed, of course, because that was the wrong distance. So the robot was set to use a distance of 9, which was the old pillar distance. But the new bridge that I have decided to go with is going to have fewer pillars. Let's see. I have a box of stone posts here. We're going to demonstrate this by starting construction a little bit. Actually, let's grab the entire stack of boxes because I might need more than 16 pillars. Let's just grab all of those. This probably will not last me the entire bridge. Very doubtful of that. Going to have to build or pop back to the base to make more. It's going to involve some teleporting. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the height that the train is on right now, or actually one block below it technically, of course. So the track is going to be at height 7 from the foundations. So currently these stone posts have a support distance of 4. So we can build 4 posts. We are at 3, so we can build one more out from the pillar. Putting one more here would cause a collapse. So the idea is that I'm going to build another set of pillars below, like so, and hopefully I can fit one in there. So this is going to support this block here. So this is basically like a secondary pillar. And I did run out. So now we can build 4 more blocks out like this. And that is that. So if I jump down, you can see that we have the same distance here. And then the pillar from this end, which there isn't really one right now, would meet this. So there should be 8 blocks. I do have tape measure, so we can measure from here. Pretty sure the measure from my position. So if we stand about here, you can see that there's 8 blocks. and out here, under this, where this ends, is 9 blocks. So we have 8 blocks, and the pillar would be here, of course, but I can't put anything there yet. Oh, right. No, there it is. I was afraid the robot still had my drill, because I had to let it use it to dig out the foundations, of course. So, as you can see, we have 8 blocks out from where the pillar is going to be to here. And then that would continue all the way to the other shore. So this means that we require a lot fewer pillars than we did before. And then there would be track on top of that, of course. So what we are going to do now, because basically what I need to do is wait for the robot to either run out of cobblestone, run into something, or for it to reach its maximum distance. Because the robot is using power for placing cobblestone and moving and such, there's going to be a point where it comes back for a recharge, recharges, then turns around, goes back out, but before it can get to where the next pillar is going to be, it's going to run low on power, and the function is going to tell it to go back and recharge again. And then it's going to come back, recharge, go back out, and then turn around and come back and recharge, and get stuck in a loop like that. Which wouldn't be a good thing, of course, because then the robot can't work anymore. So at that point, what I'm going to have to do is move this setup out in that direction. So I'm going to have to move the charging station and the cobblestone source, probably build a little platform around one of the pillars, one above the water, of course, because I don't want to disturb the surface unless I have to. And that would extend the reach of the robot. And what I'm doing now is I have to remove this block, because the robot is going to come through here. It's going to need to be able to move past here, but I don't want to take this down now that I've put it up. So I'm going to put a support block on the side there so it doesn't collapse. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to Notepad++, and we'll have a look at the foundation removing program, which is a bit similar to the foundation program, but not quite. So we're going to have a look at that, because I don't really have anything to do right now except that we can do in this episode, except watch the robot come back eventually to get more cobblestone, probably. So I'll see you in a little bit outside of Minecraft in Notepad++. Alright, so here we are in Notepad++, and we have the foundation removing robot program here. And as you can see, we have some setup stuff. Get some requires in the beginning, setting the robot object from the components, the redstone card, and the chunk loader upgrade, so we can control those. Then we have some initial variables. We have two important ones, the pillar distance and the max distance. This is used to count how many blocks since the last pillar was encountered, or since the last foundation. And this is the maximum distance that is allowed to reach. So before I had it set to 10 because the pillars were about 9 blocks apart or something like that. Which meant that if the robot traveled 10 blocks and didn't find a pillar, it would end the program and come back because there wouldn't be any more pillars because they are supposed to be within 10 blocks of each other. Then we have a bunch of functions. We have the shutdown needs empty and get charge level and needs recharge. And these are basically straight from the foundation program, which we have up here. And except the needs empty program, which if we go in here, it's called needs restock. And this is basically what it runs to check if it needs to go back to get more cobblestone. In here, I've basically inverted this so it checks how much cobblestone is in the inventory. And if there is too much, that is more than this value here, which I believe should leave 2 slots empty. If it's exactly this, that means the inventory is too full. The robot will then go back and empty its inventory into the drawer so that it can fit more cobblestone. Fortunately, it never the robot didn't have time to place more than an inventory's worth of cobblestone before I figured out that it was set to the wrong distance and stopped it. So of course the inventory didn't have time to fill up when it was collecting those foundations again. So then we have a new function called remove foundation. And this is run when it finds a foundation, of course. And it has 2 local variables, move down, which counts how many blocks the robot has moved down, similar to what it does when it builds the foundations. And then we have this block, which is set to true initially, because when this is run, it's basically found a cobblestone block in the surface of the water, which means that there is a foundation there. So it's at least going to remove that. So this can be true initially. Then we have a while loop. So while this block is true, it is going to swing down, which means that it is going to use the current tool to break whatever block is below the robot, which would be a cobblestone block. Once it has done that, it is going to suck from the downside, which means that it is going to collect any item entities that are in that block space. And because it happens immediately after this is done, which is when the cobblestone is broken, that cobblestone block is going to be in that block space because it's not going to have time to fly off anywhere. So it's going to pick up the cobblestone because I don't want to waste it, even though it's just cobblestone, I guess. Then it's going to move down, or try to at least, and it should be able to because it just broke whatever block was below it. And then it's going to increase move down by 1 because it moved down 1 block. Then it's going to do the robot compare again, which is it has done once before coming into this function. It's going to compare the block below the robot. Now, robot compare, what it does is it checks the block below the robot or on the side, which is currently set to down, and it compares it to whatever is in the currently selected slot in the robot's inventory. And if these match, this will return true. If they are not the same, it will return false. So it sets this block to either false or true. And then it's going to come back here and it's going to evaluate this block again. So if the block it compared was cobblestone, so which means that there is more cobblestone underneath the robot, it's going to start the loop again, and it's going to break it and then move down. Then compare again. Once it gets to something that is not cobblestone, like the bottom of the ocean, which is generally sand, it can also be smooth stone and dirt, but it's pretty much never cobblestone. So once it reaches one of those blocks, it's going to stop, and the loop will end, and it won't run through it again, so it won't break any more blocks. It is then going to reset the pillar distance, because it found a pillar and it has collected it. Then it's going to run this loop to get back up. So it's going to move up while move down, which we increased for each block we moved down. So it's going to move back up, and for every block it moves up, it's going to remove one from this variable. And once this is 0, which means there are no more blocks to move up, this loop will end, because move down is no longer greater than 0. So that's that function. It ends here, and it comes back out into the main program. Here we turn on the chunk loader, and I've also started using this method. And what this does is it sets the color of the strip that goes around the robot, the colored lights. So you can use that as an indicator on for what the robot is doing. So here we set it to green, which means that the robot is working as intended. Then we enter the main loop of the program. So this is going to run while done is true. And we set done to true. Actually, we set done to... Oh no, it's going to run while done is not true, because we have a not before. So we set not to or done to false up here. So this is going to be false. So it's not true. So we're going to enter into the main program. We're going to evaluate this. And this is used to indicate when the robot is going to return and empty its inventory. But we don't really have to pay any attention to that, because initially that is going to be false. Then we get into here. So we're going to move forward, or try to. And if that works, where move will return true if it could move forward, and pillar distance is lower than the max distance, or less than. And if both of those are true, so if the robot could move forward and the pillar distance is lower than the max distance, it's going to increase the pillar distance by 1, because it hasn't found a pillar yet. It's going to make sure that the first inventory slot is selected, because we know there is cobblestone there. Then it's going to compare the block below the robot, output the result to the console so we can see it if we're looking in the interface at the time or afterwards. And then if it managed to do this, if it managed to move, that's all it's going to do. If it fails to move forward, or it has exceeded the maximum pillar distance and not found a pillar, it is going to set return and stop to true. And it's obviously going to skip this stuff in here. So by that point, block, which we set to false up here, so initially it is false. So if it can't move or exceed the maximum pillar distance, block will be false, or whatever last value was compared, which is usually false if it doesn't find a pillar. So if it doesn't do this, it fails, it'll set return and stop to true. If block is true, which it won't be in that case, it's going to skip that and go into here. And this function will turn the robot around. It's going to set the color of the light to red, which is this code here. And then it is going to do while robot move forward. And since move returns true when it succeeds, the while loop is going to continue because it's going to keep going while this is true. But as soon as this returns false, which means the robot was not able to move forward, the loop is going to end. So it's going to continue in this end. So we don't actually need anything inside of the loop. I just have a comment there to indicate what it's doing. Then the robot is going to now be back at the charger. It's going to turn around and set done to true, which will end the main loop, which is this thing here. So now done will be true, so it will stop this loop from running the next time it tries. It will also deactivate the chunk loader, so it stops loading chunks. So that is what happens if it fails to move or exceeds the max distance. If it succeeds in moving and pillar distance is still lower than max distance, it's going to do the scan. So it's going to set this to true if it's above a pillar or a foundation, and it's going to set it to false if it is not, if it's above water basically, or possibly ice, I guess. Then it's going to skip this bit, of course, because none of these were false, or both of these were true, rather. So then it's going to evaluate this. So if it found a pillar, which means that block is true, it is going to go into this if statement. It's going to print this text, and then run the remove foundation function. Because if it is in here, it means that block is true, and that means it is above a foundation. If it didn't find a foundation, this is going to be false, and it's going to skip this. And since it didn't go in here, because neither of these were false, this return and stop is still going to be false, so it's going to skip this bit as well. And then it's going to reach the end of the loop, and it's going to start over up here. So if return and empty if this is false, it's going to skip this again. And I just realized I don't actually do the power or inventory check anywhere in this program, which fortunately wasn't a problem, but I probably should add that in for if I need to use this again. But oh well. So then it's going to do this bit again. It's going to move forward if it can, and then if it could, it's going to do the scan. Each time it does this, pillar distance is going to increase, as long as, and like we saw before, inside of this function, when it finds a pillar, it resets the pillar distance to 0. But if it goes for too long without finding a pillar, this is eventually going to get bigger than max distance, and then everything is going to fail, and the robot is going to return. And that's pretty much the program. So that's going to do it for this episode. I don't really have much else to do, and we're reaching the end point. Basically what I need to do now is wait for the robot to do its thing and maybe build some start building the bridge, because that is not something I'm going to record. And then I guess we'll be back once the bridge reaches the other shore. And we may also have some more Twilight Forest episodes in between. The next one might be one of those, but we'll see. So, with that, I will see you in the next episode.